I get lots of good questions involving the sword, and one of them is, well, you just pick it up and start to use it, right? That's all it is. It's just, you just pick it up and start hacking, right? That's how it works. And I'm like, no, there's so much more to Kenjutsu that is a life's endeavor. And what keeps inspiring me is that there's so much to learn about this one particular tool, this one particular weapon. And in our martial art, we have dozens of different tools, but this one is so involved that it can be a vehicle toward happiness. What do I mean by that is the more that I practice the sword, the more I'm learning about myself. Each of these subcategories that I'll quickly go over, I was going over them last night with some students, has to do with mastering yourself. And we know, of course, my opinion is you can never master anything, but you can become better at it than we were yesterday. So by studying Kenjutsu, I'm studying how to live. I'm studying how to stay calm when things go wrong. I'm studying how to stay the course when the ship goes awry. When a storm happens, how to lessen the burden of stress and anger and let that stuff go to allow more calmness, equanimity, and love in. This is a method of study that the samurai used, and you could say that they worshiped their tool, their weapon, but they used it to find out who they were as people. And they always balanced this with some sort of art, such as the tea ceremony or flower arranging, poetry, painting, writing, you name it. But let me quickly go over this Kenjutsu learning tree. First thing we do is whenever we're doing something, it's called keiko, we're practicing. The art of practice is the art of purpose. When I'm practicing something, I'm not living in a mundane life. I'm waking up with purpose. And inspiration is very different than other things. When you're inspired to do something, people don't have to tell you to do it. You just wake up inspired. It's different than motivation. Motivation is good, but it's very temporary. I can be motivated by pain or motivated by reward, but that goes away very fast. Whereas inspiration is a burning thing inside of us that keeps us going. It's purpose, it's meaning. It is keiko. It's the idea of getting up and wanting to be better at something, whether it's our job or how we're dealing with a relationship in our life, or just how I deal with myself as a person. Practice, practice. And this is what keeps me going decade after decade, is I'm inspired, not just by other teachers, but by things like this that I will never be very good at, but I want to be better than I was yesterday. Once you pick up a sword, here's one here. The first thing you need to learn about is reiho, which is etiquette. How do I respect this thing that can take someone's life? So reiho etiquette is important. Bowing to the sword, using it, knowing that it's sharp. Same thing when you go to a firearms range. You know where to point the pistol so you don't destroy other things. You know what's downrange, who's around you. Is it loaded? You know everything about the weapon. Firearms are a wonderful modern way of understanding Kenjutsu, believe it or not. Now, when you're in the etiquette stages, people just think you can start going into techniques. It's not. You have to learn how ten no uchi, how to grip the sword. How do I even hold the thing? Am I holding it correctly? Am I getting the maximum power from the shape and the design of the weapon? You have to know the parts of the sword. What's it made of? How do I take it apart and clean it? Again, like gunsmithing. You have a gun, you have to know how to take it apart. You have to know how to load the magazine. Then you have to go into a sight picture. You have to go into stances. All these little things that you have to learn to be better at firearms. It's the same with Kenjutsu. It is a keiko learning process. You can spend months on just the etiquette alone. Then you learn kamae, posture. How do I stand with a sword? Why are certain stances different than others? Why is it this way and that way? If I'm a lefty, which I am, you have to use the sword right-handed. That was required by law in old Japan. There were no lefties. There were left-handed sword practices, but they were hidden in secret. So you have to relearn everything so that you become ambidextrous. Then you have to learn the kokyu, the breathing control. so that you don't lose your breath after 1 minute of exercise or moving with the sword. So if you're defending yourself, the first thing that goes is your breath. Your heart constricts, you get all scared. Very natural. You have to learn kokyu breathing. And in order to give a ki shout if you need to, that also will affect the outcome of the battle. Then you go into Ei, which is about awareness. Ei Jitsu, awareness drawing or fast drawing. Being aware is a whole other subset of Kenjutsu that can be years in the training. Tonight we're doing an Ei class. Tonight in a few hours. And this is just one small section we're working on tonight. Then there's a subsection of Bato Jitsu, which is to draw and to cut. Bato Jitsu is just an older form of Ei. It's the same thing almost, but it's an older form. Iaido, Ei Jitsu is a more modern concept. But Bato Jitsu is how to draw and cut with the sword all at once. Then you have to use Sayabiki. How do I take the sword out swiftly? Do I draw it and lose my grip here? No, and you have to learn how to remove the sai with your hips. That's the secret to the speed of the draw. So Sayabiki is a whole other thing that we could train for weeks and months on just that one little section of Kenjutsu. Then Nukitsuke, drawing and cutting the sword quickly, how to remove it in different ways, how to reverse the grip, how to do a reverse grip up and down, so not just a traditional grip here, how to hold the sword in a reverse grip, left and right-handed, one or two-handed. All of these things can be worked on in every single technique we learn. Shiburi, how to remove the blood from the sword. That's a whole other practice. Every school has their little idiosyncrasies of how they remove the blood from the sword so it doesn't rust your blade, which a good quality blade will do in just a couple of hours in humidity. How do I wipe the blood off the blade before returning it to the scabbard? All of these things have techniques and methods to them that should not be overlooked for the serious student. Then Tameshigiri, I have to learn how to cut with the darn thing. This is an Ei sword, it's not sharp, but if it was a Shinken, I would have to know how to cut, because you're going to get all kinds of bounce when you hit something. It's going to vibrate and you'll drop your sword. You have to know the proper angle of the blade in order to cut properly. Again, these are things that will take thousands of hours with bamboo or straw or whatever you use, tatami mats. In the old days, they used convicts, they used bad people, and they would use them to test their sword. Barbaric, but now we use bamboo and grass, things like that. That's a whole other section. Noto, how do I put the sword back? Noto, to return it back to the saya, is a whole other thing so that you don't cut your fingers off. Anyone who does Kenjutsu has cut themselves at some point. So if I'm not paying attention, Ei, and I put the sword back and I cut my fingers here, you could be out of practice for months. There are scrolls where I've read that swordsmen are missing a thumb or a finger, and it's not always because of the opponent. It could be because of the way they put their sword back, perhaps. Kiri, how to cut with the sword. That's a whole other section. Tai sabaki, what's my footwork like? So I'm not just a kendo, just standing there. It's kenjutsu, it's the art of fighting here too. So I have to learn about timing and distancing. And when the guy's coming at me, how do I move to the left, to the right? Pivot on the tanken, urimi, move in. All of these concepts of the timing and the distancing, this is what makes it a lifelong endeavor and not something that you study for 2 months and quit. The distancing of the ukenagashi, how do I block with the sword and make it, hide behind it so that I can do a counter cut? All of these things are awesome because it takes so long just to learn one little section. I love this stuff. And then, after all of this, years of training, years with different teachers, then we go into the waza, the techniques. That's not till way later. The problem with Americans, myself included, is we want everything now, right? Like Veruca Salt. I want it now. Amazon, our phones, our computers have taught us a terrible habit of not being patient and earning things in our life. We expect it tomorrow or by today. Hey, I want it shipped today. So there's no working and striving for months and years toward a goal. We expect it tomorrow. And then what happens is the people that are used to that quit so quickly because they're not willing to put the effort in toward anything in life. And immediately my gut reaction when I don't work towards something for years and years and get good at it is I run, I quit. It's too difficult. I got to go away quickly and try something else, because when I have difficulty, I quit. And that has everything to do with our technology, sadly, and what's happening to us, the text versus the conversation, all these things that we could go into. But I'm telling you, it happens. So I have to earn the way into the techniques. And then once you learn all the techniques, and there are hundreds of them depending on your school, again, these are decades worth of learning. And once you think you know a technique, you go away from it, you leave it for a while to study something else, and then you come back 6 months later, a year later, 5 years later, and you see the techniques completely differently. Because learning is not a circle. Learning is a spiral. I go around and I see it, and then I go deeper down into the knowledge. And it never ends. It's like a never-ending cyclone. Then the munen comes, or the shuhari part of learning, where I've learned all of the mechanics. I've studied them for years, and my teacher says, okay, now I want you to break free from that. Be like the water, as Bruce Lee said. I want to break free in the shuhari, and I want to start to free flow. Can I free respond with my weapon here instead of sticking to a kata? Because if the bad guy moves one way and you move one way, the whole kata breaks down. You have to be able to free respond to what's coming in under severe pressure. And then eventually, after many decades, you create your own system. You add to the technique. You add to the old texts. And that's when the student becomes the teacher. Teacher becomes the professor. Professor becomes, quote-unquote, master, so to speak. And again, I don't like that word, but people use it. So the shuhari principle of learning is always there, but you can't just skip to the re part, the shu. You have to start with the basics, the kihon, the fundamentals, and then you work your way up. And again, I started when I was 8 years old, and I'm 50, and I'm still learning everything about little sections of these that are holes in my training that I wasn't taught, or that I figured out on my own, or I learned in some book somewhere, and then I added in to where I am at my age. Because the way I'm learning now is not the way I learned when I was 15 or 25 or 35. I'm learning very differently. And as you get older, you want more wisdom because you lose strength. So we have to train with a little bit more intelligence than how I trained when I was 20, when I could rely on strength and the weapon. You know, it's like the old saying from the Conan movie, remember? When James Earl Jones was, there was a time where I sought out steel. He was talking about in his younger days how he would search for the best weapon, and he thought it was about the weapon. And you watch that movie, he found out, no, the power is in here, the power is in the hand that wields it. So that's, you guys that have seen that movie know exactly what I'm talking about. But this is inspirational, kenjutsu. Well, why do we learn the sword in modern day? Because it's something that I can do with my time, and it's something I can learn and get better at. It's a keiko practice. Same with martial arts, same with firearms training, same with work, the same with getting better with my family, the same at whatever thing you pick, whatever vehicle that you want to sit your butt in and drive towards your goal, this is one. And with our martial art, there are dozens to choose from. And never, ever, ever have a favorite weapon. All of them are good. All of them have their validity. But there's something about this that teaches me how to live. And it's so, I know it's a paradox. It's a life-taking weapon, but it's a life-giving weapon as well. And there's so much that I can learn about this guy through this. And that is why I study kenjutsu. I love it. I wake up in the morning hungry for it. And that inspiration has never gone away. Yes, you have highs and lows, but that's part of the journey. Nothing is a straight line. It's always a mountain and a valley. So tonight we're going to do some iaido. We're not going to film it because that is not for consumption on the internet. It is for people that are inspired to be here at the dojo and come in and bring their sword, and we train and practice, and we have a great time. We make mistakes. We succeed. But that's not something that I'm going to show people. That's something we're not going to film. But I did want to show you the prerequisite to training tonight, which is knowing all of these sections of the sword and how we can joyfully spend time in all of these subsets with this one particular weapon. Isn't that cool? Hopefully you guys at home are training, or you can find a teacher where you can train. That's the best. Second best is just to buy a sword, a bokken or an EI or something, and go out into your backyard and practice and train. I do that all the time. The solo training is so important. So if you don't have an opponent or someone, an uke to work with, at least go out into the cornfield or the forest or the beach and train by yourself. That's a lot better than sitting around and just imagining what it would be like. And 2D training, which is watching something on a movie, is not the same as physically doing it, okay? So get yourself a sword and start the journey. We'll see you guys soon. Thanks so much for watching.